Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11 of the Lunar Observer.
It's
the
episode
unscheduled.
12.
Oh, well, it says 11 on here. All right.
Oops.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 12 of the Lunar Observer, the unscheduled podcast about fans discussing Insomniac games, the creators of Spyro, Ratchet, and Resistance. I'm Division 10, joined by Kebabs.
Hello, that's me.
So we did a little bit of role reversal, and I'm going to be doing some of the intros from here on out, but Kebabs is now going to be in charge of the news. So before we dive into the news, and it is a lot of news.
Yeah, we've been away for quite a while due to the fact that I am I'm taking a break right now, but I was doing a lot of animation work at Weta Digital, and lots of the big news stories broke right while I was in the middle of crunch, and there was no way for us to record an episode in that time.
Yes, and then just as Kebabs was getting out of crunch, I was getting into crunch. I competed at one of the major costuming competitions on the East Coast and came in 4th place.
Nice.
So I'm pretty proud of myself. Ratchet and Clank did pretty well. So there was that. So when Kebabs was just exiting crunch, I ran headlong into it, and so here we are. But it is March, and we're back into the swing of things, and super excited for all of the news coming up. And surprisingly, there's quite a bit of it that isn't Ratchet and Clank. So I'm really looking forward to talking about some of those things too.
Yeah, which is nice for us because most of our expertise and interests are Ratchet and Clank, and for me that also extends to Spyro the Dragon, but mostly for the original games. So when something like Song of the Deep or Sunset Overdrive comes along, then that's always nice to introduce some variety.
Definitely. But before we get into the news, why don't we spend maybe 5 minutes catching our viewers up on what we've been up to. So what games have you been playing lately, to Kebabs?
Well, this is perfectly timed for the Pokemon 20th anniversary, but I've basically been buying up all the Pokemon games that I've been wanting to play. Because when I was a kid, this was around about 2002, 2003, I discovered the Visual Boy Advance Game Boy Advance emulator. And it was there that I was able to play most of the Pokemon games, Yellow, Crystal, Fire Red, and Emerald. And I've always wanted to play them sort of properly, and I have. I've basically bought my sister's old 3DS, borrowed her boyfriend's DS Lite, and I've bought all of said games in addition to Heart Gold and Omega Ruby.
Yeah, I'm excited to see you go through Omega Ruby. I actually haven't played Ruby and Sapphire. It's the only gen of Pokemon that I've skipped. Just to timing, I believe I was in China when it came out. And you know about the console ban over there. So that's an interesting thing. So I never got a chance to pick up Omega Ruby or Alpha Sapphire. So I think I'm going to pick up your opposite, grab Sapphire, and join you for the adventure.
Cool. And with Pokemon, yeah, basically I bought the cartridges for all of the above games, and for Pokemon Yellow, I just waited until the digital release on 3DS. It is a very good port and actually plays it better than the Visual Boy Advance emulator, because you know how in Pokemon Yellow they changed the audio cries for the Pikachu that follows you around. They changed it to actual audio clips of the Japanese voice actor saying Pikachu's lines.
Yeah, she's very well known for her work.
Yeah, on Visual Boy Advance it garbles the audio cues, but on the 3DS emulator it plays them perfectly.
That's awesome. Not only that, but you can also trade over the internet, A, but B, the big one is with Pokemon Sun and Moon, you can move your Pokemon from Red, Blue, or Yellow up into current gen.
Yeah, And that makes me sort of hopeful that it's not my favorite Pokemon game, but it's certainly the one that I am the most fond of. I'm hoping that they give Generation 2 the Gold, Silver, and Crystal. They give it the 3DS treatment just like they did Gen 1, because then, if they give that all the compatibility, then you would now be able to trade Pokemon from all Pokemon games into the modern ones.
Yeah, because starting with Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, you could keep bringing your Pokemon up, all the way up through, from there to Heart, Gold, Soul, Silver, from there to Black and White to the modern games.
Yeah, and the reason why is because with Generation 3, they changed sort of how the Pokemon data works, and they have more attributes like, their nature and stuff like that.
Yep, nature, gender, splitting special happened in the second gen. Gen 1 to Gen 2 was the biggest single leap in the way those stats were set up.
Yeah, gender was actually also in Generation 2, by the way.
Yeah, that's the first time, because you had Togepi and they introduced egg hatching.
Yeah.
Anyway, what have I been playing? It's not Pokemon. I did actually get a free coupon for Pokemon Yellow, which I still haven't redeemed. But I got Fire Emblem, and that has been what little gaming I have done has been that. So while I'm on public transit,
I thought you were going to say Fire Red. It sounds very similar.
No, I actually have Leaf Green, not Fire Red. I have, other than Ruby and Sapphire, I have at least one Pokemon game from every generation.
Nice.
Yeah, so Ruby Sapphire and Omega Ruby Omega Sapphire, I've missed both of those, and I really need to pick up Alpha, whatever. I need to pick up Alpha Sapphire. But yeah, I got Fire Emblem Birthright, and then I downloaded Conquest as DLC because I couldn't get the special edition. And I am loving it so far. I know people had some complaints about translation issues, but I'm very happy with the final product. I'm less happy with what I'm hearing about as far as translation issues for Bravely Second, where they've cut out entire side quests. I think that's a little bit overkill, personally.
Because they're too hard to translate?
No, because character death.
Okay.
They're trying to market in the US, at least in the US, I don't know about the European release. Certain choices in Bravely Second lead to permanent character death.
Okay. Lots of RPGs
and they cut
that.
Yeah, they cut that out of the English version. Nobody knows why. They also changed a lot of the costumes, and I'm not really miffed about that, because the first Bravely Default had a few rather risque costumes, but the characters are really too young for that. They're like 14, 16, and they're in like chainmail bikinis. The game was amazing. Why do you need to put a 14-year-old in a chainmail bikini?
I've always found that with anime and anime-inspired works like Fire Emblem, what you do is that you write on the profile card that the character is 14, but when you draw them, you add 4 years to their appearance.
Yeah, in the English version, they upped their ages to 16, 18, so that they were all legal age. And they slightly modified a few of the costumes. And honestly, the modified versions, in my opinion, are actually prettier.
Yeah. One of the reasons I think they might have had to cut it out is because when they released the game in Japan, the only language they had to support was Japanese.
Yeah.
For an international release, they would need more space on the disc for all the various language texts and audio. And because of that, they may have had to cut some stuff out.
That's possible, but the first version of the game, the international release, included all, not just all text in every language, but all audio as well. I could play Bravely Default, an English copy of it, in Japanese if I wanted to.
Okay.
So, unless it has a much larger amount of content, like we're talking tenfold, I don't see why that's an issue. Unless they just didn't have time to translate, which is more likely.
Yeah, maybe.
But anyway, let's jump into the news. We can always discuss this a little bit later.
Yeah, I'll do the usual audio cue segment. And now it's time for the news. So, we have a long list of news items. Can you guess how many there are?
Oh, I don't want to guess because I have the list in front of me. Now, I don't have any of the details because you're the ones who are, you're going to be reading most of these articles.
Mm-hmm.
But we have as many news items as there are months in the year.
Yeah, well, actually, I added a 13th item, and you know what that makes?
As many months as there are in the Jewish calendar this year?
No, it makes a baker's dozen!
It does.
Anyway, the first item comes straight from PSX, and to be honest, I'm surprised we didn't actually cover this. During PSX, Insomniac announced that the 2016 Ratchet and Clank game on PlayStation 4 will release on April 12th in the US, a few weeks before the film comes out at the end of that month. The PlayStation blog in Europe, meanwhile, confirmed dates of April 15th for France and April 20th for the other Sony Computer Entertainment territories, placing it in the same week as the film, which comes out April 29th.
Yeah, I remember us being really excited about it at PSX. I'm surprised we didn't actually mention that.
Yeah.
So,
I guess it just got lost in all the details of the fact that we were there. We wanted to cover as much of the game as possible because we're on the ground floor, and a lot of the time, Ratchet and Clank gets ignored, sort of. Well, not ignored, but just sort of passed over for bigger things like Destiny and whatnot at the show. So for people on the forums, what literally happened was that we would come back to the hotel on day one, and then lots of people would explode on the forums, and they discovered that we were there. So they asked, could you test out this, and this? And that's what we did.
Yeah, so that was our, of the 2 days at the event, our Sunday was actually going to the booth again and testing everything out at the kiosk. And also not being able to move because Ratchet and Clank were playing Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like the best video game convention I've been to, and I've been to a lot.
It was the only video game convention I've been to.
We need to fix that then, don't we?
Yeah. E3, here we come.
E3's really not what it used to be. It's a lot of backdoor stuff now. If you want to go to a good video game convention in the US, your choices are probably PAX, definitely PAX, or Gen Con, really.
Get rid of the A and I'll be there. Replace the A with an S and I'll be there. But that was a joke, by the way.
I giggled.
Okay. But several fans and an outlet or two have noted that the game's release date is right in the middle of Dark Souls 3 and Uncharted 4.
Yes, it is. Now, when the game was announced for this date, it was just Dark Souls 3. Uncharted 4 got delayed and ended up picking its delay date to the same day as Ratchet and Clank.
Well, not the same day, but basically the week after.
Yes, it was 1 week in between.
Yeah,
now,
I will admit I was slightly annoyed at that because they would have known what the Ratchet release date was, and I thought Naughty Dog and Insomniac were friends.
It is a very, very tight month, though, for games, just in general. And
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people complain that it's sharing the same release date as Dark Souls, but honestly, they are not targeting the same audience.
No,
if Uncharted
plus Dark Souls 3 is being heavily associated with Xbox.
Yes, there's that, but the bigger one is Dark Souls 3 is very, very specifically an adult game. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean it's not a game, it's not a family game. It's not a game you're going to be picking up for your, 7-year-old to play with them, which is what you'd be doing with Ratchet and Clank. There's plenty of adults that play it. Us.
Yeah. When I look at the checklist of Dark Souls 3 characteristics and Ratchet characteristics, they are literally opposite. One is fast, friendly, typically known for being easy and is very colorful, while the other is dark, depressing, and extremely hard. And
excruciatingly slow. Well, individual deaths are quick, but It's known for its incredibly precise gameplay.
Yeah, and yeah, it plays slower, and if it has the load times of Bloodborne, then it will be even slower.
But yeah, I mean, there is some overlap. There are people who like both, but as far as general audiences is concerned, I'm not concerned that the two games releasing on the same date will have very much effect on each other's release sales numbers.
Yeah.
Their audiences are just too different.
Yeah, there's still a little bit of mindshare stealing effect going on, though, because in addition to the fact that Fallout 4 was bigger, one of the problems that Tomb Raider faced coming out on the same day as Fallout 4 is that people were thinking about Fallout 4 more than Tomb Raider.
This is true. So people who are going into the game store, who are gamers themselves and might be considering, hey, am I buying a game for me or am I buying something for my family? If they're Dark Souls fans, they might be putting that over Ratchet, even if they were considering that as well. But honestly, as far as on the whole, people who are thinking about Ratchet or are interested in it, yeah, there are some who like both, but those are the people who are just dedicated gamers in general.
Yeah.
And that's true of just Dark Souls in particular, is that's a very specific fan base.
Yeah. I also mentioned on the forums that Ratchet has the distinct feature, I guess, I can't find the right word for it. It has the distinction of also having a movie that comes out a fair amount of time later.
Wait.
In some places.
Can I freeze?
Yeah.
Uncharted 4 has just been delayed again.
Really?
Yep, the news just came out. It's now in May.
Kotaku, really?
Link to the news.
Uncharted 4 delayed another 2 weeks.
Yep.
Ooh. Will now be out May 10th, 2 weeks later than previously announced. Third delay, which will mark the end to Nathan Drake's adventures. Delay Gates 2016, the year of delays being delayed again.
So just as we're talking about it, I see the news.
Oh, nice. Well, good on you for picking that out. Well, that certainly eases Ratchet Clank, the game.
Yeah, because I was also considering picking up Uncharted, and I have a disposable income budget limit. So having those two so close together, it was getting pushed out for Ratchet. Now I'm not so worried about it because there's now a 3-week gap instead of one.
Yeah, definitely eases Ratchet. But I was just about to mention that the Ratchet and Clank movie is a unique thing for Ratchet because if the marketing is played right and they do the smart thing of putting a trailer for the game in front of the movie, then the game could have a second wind, so to speak.
Yeah.
As people who may not have picked it up or even been aware that it was a game are notified that there's a game, and that puts in a boost in sales.
Oh, definitely.
Well, that was certainly very unique.
Yeah. It was literally a newsflash.
We usually are with this sort of thing.
We literally just broke the news as it happened.
Although by the time this is uploaded, it'll be old news. But still, it's relevant, very relevant. I imagine that they'll be chattering away on the forums right now.
Alright, so why don't we move on to the next thing?
Yes, the next news item is the price for the Oculus Rift. At CES in January, Oculus announced the price of their VR headset, the Rift, at $600, not counting tax and shipping, which incidentally is the same price the PlayStation 3 launched at, way back in 2006. The final package will include the titular headset, a sensor to detect head movements, an Oculus remote, the necessary cables, and an Xbox One controller, as well as Eve Valkyrie and Lucky's Tale as pack-in games. Yeah.
That's an expense, and also you have to keep in mind that you need a good enough computer to actually play said Rift.
Yeah, exactly. This is it's unique from... comparing it to the PlayStation VR. Yeah, the VR needs basically a booster box so that it can play VR games at an acceptable quality, but it runs on any PlayStation 4.
Yeah, so the the Oculus Rift needs from what I've seen as far as specs go, like at least an $800 computer in order to run it. So if you don't already have the good computer, you're not looking at a $600 purchase. You're looking at minimum of $1,400 one.
Yeah. A lot of podcasts and places have been likening this to basically G1 iPhone, where really you're buying into the name and the fact that you can say you have one more than you are buying a good value on a product.
Yeah.
Basically.
Now I've actually gotten the chance to play with a Rift.
Except you didn't, because you can't use them, right?
Yeah, no, I could only survive about 15 minutes before I had to take the thing off.
Okay. Can you literally not see it? Or
no, I can see it, but because I can only see out of one eye at a time, the 3D effect is lost on me. But I was still at least able to experience the fact that I'm stepping into the world, that I can move my head around in the world. I'm basically, my head is the camera.
Yeah, a lot of
so that
VR
effect
games
isn't
are
lost.
first person.
Yeah, so that isn't lost on me. But what is that I simply can't see I can't see Oculus in 3D. But I was still able to navigate around a 3D world. I got to try Minecraft. And it was definitely an experience.
Yeah.
But is it worth for me $1,400, $1,600?
No.
No, it is not.
Yeah. Also, because Edge of Nowhere is a Rift exclusive, that means it'll be highly unlikely that we'll be able to play it and give personal feedback here on the show. So, yeah.
I may be able to go to my friend's place where I tried the first Rift just to give it a try. But that's going to depend on her buying the game.
Yeah, of course. Unless there's a demo, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to happen, and that's interesting to see. Will there be a demo? How will demos work on Oculus Rift? Are they available? What is the storefront going to be like? Is it going to be that you install an app on your computer like Steam for Rift?
Will they do a PlayStation Home and make it a 3D walkable storefront?
Yeah, I'm very curious just from a gaming perspective what the UI is going to be like for this combined sort of system, because up until now there have been most of the quote unquote Oculus Rift games have just been support for existing games, Portal, Half-Life, Minecraft, as well as a couple of experiments like Lucky's Tale.
Yeah, and Eve Valkyrie, which is basically a spin-off of the core Eve game.
Yeah, so I'm just very curious to see, are they going to have a unified storefront like Steam does? Because Steam has the Vive coming out.
Yeah, my prediction is that the storefront will be okay, but it will be like Steam Big Picture, where it will mostly be considered a mess until they get their crap together.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think the price means for PlayStation VR then?
PlayStation VR, how much was the Vive? I think the Vive was between $600 and $800 as well.
It
means
$800.
that it's $800.
Yes,
I knew it was somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
It means that the
Palmer Lucky specifically described the Rift as being a premium headset. You know, no expense spared, and the Vive is even more expensive than that. So that's like supercar territory.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what the PlayStation VR is going to be. It's probably, if I were to take a guess, they could do one of two things. They could price it at the cost that they need to actually sell it at, in which case I don't know what that actually is. Or they could price it for competition and absorb some of that money, as most consoles do. I don't know if our listeners know this, but when you're buying a console, even though it's several $100s, you're actually usually buying it at less than the cost it takes to make it.
Yeah, that's why lots of consoles have revision versions, like the PS2 Slim, the second version of the SNES that loads on the top rather than the front. Or was that the original NES? I don't know. But yeah, lots of consoles have had second versions that are usually sort of, now that the technology has come along and they've got their audience, they release a newer version that is actually viable for them to sell.
Yeah, so the consoles are usually sold at or below cost to begin with for one very specific reason. They earn their money back from you buying the games. It's
Yeah.
the same thing as printers with printer ink, really. So, I'm curious to see if they decide to sell it at or below cost in the hopes that people buy more games to play with it and that's how they earn their money. Or if they're going to sell it at least some small profit.
Yeah, I'm thinking they're going to take the eat it option, or at least they'll lean more towards that, because I'm not sure if you noticed, but the PS4 is the first Sony console that isn't being sold at cost.
Yeah, it's the first time they're actually able to make a profit off of it.
Yeah, so yeah, that just means less of a risk for them. And the other thing that I personally think that the PSVR will be sold at $400, in particular because Palmer Lucky described the PSVR as not being the premium headset that the Rift is. It's meant to be a more consumer entry level, sort of more on the level of a Nintendo DS compared to the PlayStation Vita.
Which
That's
is
my
interesting
comparison.
because PlayStation up until this point has been sort of known in the gaming community as shoving more stuff in it. This is part of why the Vita fail was it was so premium that it was too expensive.
Yeah, that was sort of old, arrogant Sony with the PlayStation 3
3,
and the
yep.
Vita, where I remember the PlayStation 3, I have it sort of sitting over here in the corner of my desk. It had ports for like 4 different SD cards, and this is supposed to be a gaming platform, and it had that. The Vita had a touchpad, which nobody uses, and a rear camera and a front camera it didn't need.
Yeah.
The only things that it really needed that it added from the PSP were the touchscreen and the right analog stick.
Yeah, I can only think of one game that uses the rear touchpad in a decent way.
Tearaway?
Tearaway.
Let's move on to the next item, and this is a biggie. Ratchet and Clank in the official PlayStation Magazine UK.
Yeah, that was a really biggie.
Yeah, and as I said, this was heartbreaking for me because I was still in the middle of animating, and I couldn't cover this at all. But the issue was in February, not February. And it's a 6-page article that covers both the film and the game, and was in fact the cover story for the magazine with new insights and screenshots. We can't really show the screenshots until they are released independent of the magazine, for when we do our in-depth video like we did last time. But we can discuss some cool bullet points from the article text. We're not going to sort of read the article verbatim, that would sort of destroy the point of reading the article, but we'll discuss some general interesting points.
Yeah, so why don't we dive in?
Yeah. Well, the first one that I noticed is that we've known that there will be new planets in the game, but the OPSM article confirmed that there are going to be a total of 3.
People had been talking about that for a while, that it was going to be 3 new planets, and interestingly enough, there was never a confirmation, or how did people get that number? But now we do have a confirmation. It is, in fact, actually 3 new planets. But we don't know how many of the old planets have been cut or condensed.
Exactly. I mean, back in the day with Ratchet and Clank 1 and 2, the planet count was much higher, more on the count of 15 to 20. And the levels themselves were also much more expansive. The average route count for a planet was typically 3, especially early on in the game. It was Upper Arsenal that really began the sort of cutting down on how many routes a level had and how many levels there were in general, down to like 10 to 15.
Yeah. They were. I think the reason is that especially Going Commando had 2 gigantic sandboxes, which we haven't seen since.
Yeah.
Also, two arena levels, which I think might actually be coming back.
Yeah, and 2 hoverbike levels too. And
Yeah.
multiple space fighting sections. They really pulled out all the stops for that game, building on the bones of Ratchet and Clank 1. One thing that I'm curious about is what counts as a new planet. Does combining Hoven and Batalia into a newly named planet count as a new planet?
I don't know if that's because it could simply be it's Batalia in snow. Is
Yeah,
that considered Batalia, or is that a new planet? I think when they say new planets, I think it's completely new planets.
yeah. Is it planet or level? I mean, I would imagine that there would be a level on Drex, the deplanetizer satellite. Would that be a new planet like Drex Fleet was?
That might be. I would honestly consider that a new quote unquote planet. That thing is huge.
Yeah, I'm thinking that the 3 new planets are 3 planets that were explicitly created for the movie storyline that are included in the game for storytelling purposes as well as gameplay. So the Planetizer is one of them. I would imagine Clank escaping from his facility, wherever it is, would also count as a new planet.
Yeah, unless that place is say BTS or something. We don't know.
Yeah. One
Um,
detail that...
I'm trying to think.
Oh, sorry. No,
Go
keep
ahead.
going. No, you.
Nope.
I was moving on, but if you're staying on this subject...
I really don't have that much else to say. All I can really say is that the article sounds very upbeat, but then again, it's a shiny, glossy magazine article for people who already like PlayStation. So it's not going to be a downer article, but it seems unusually positive.
Yeah. Well, I think this is one of the cases where you just skeptics will dismiss the game until they play it, basically.
I would agree. But I'm very excited for it. Everything I've seen and everything I got to play so far has been fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, the one concern that I have voiced on the forums is the fact that we haven't seen anything explicitly new about the game that isn't sort of the whole movie tie-in. There haven't been introductions of any new gameplay mechanics or that sort of thing.
I would say Clank's gameplay is new.
I suppose it's sort of an evolution of a crack in time, but there's nothing like there's nothing new on the level of when the maxi games like space fighting and arenas and hoverbike levels were introduced.
This is true.
There's nothing on that level, and I think I know why that is. It's because this is the first Ratchet game that has been made for PS4, and critically, it's the first Ratchet game on Insomniac's new next-gen engine, the one that they used for Fuse and Sunset Overdrive. As such, aside from the Quick Select, which was in Sunset Overdrive, they basically have to rebuild everything. So they don't really have the time or resources to put in any brand new gameplay mechanics.
Yeah.
But I'd
So they're
imagine
really
in reviews that would be one of the things that would note the game down.
yeah, that it's very well done, but what's new?
Which is generally the comment I think that Tools of Destruction got for pretty much exactly the same reasons. First Ratchet game on a new console and a new engine. The 2 things really that they introduced, aside from conversations and storytelling and stuff, the only things they really introduced was Aphelion battles and combat devices.
And combat devices weren't that good.
No, well, they introduced Veritanium mods. That was very, very cool. But yeah, combat devices didn't exactly work because they were ridiculously expensive, and for me, they didn't earn XP, so I didn't really feel like using them because they're just going to steal XP from weapons I'd rather upgrade.
Yeah.
One of the other points, and this is actually a concerning point for me, is that parts of the voice recordings for the movie were recorded after the animation, And as an animator who has actually been in the industry now, this is a huge departure from most productions that I know of, which is where the voice is recorded first and then the film is animated around the voice clips.
Yeah, so it sounds almost like dubbing. Now, believe it or not, in Japan, this is how most animation is done.
Really?
The voice, yeah, they dub their own anime locally. Yeah, so in Japan, usually the entire cast sits down together and records their lines as a unit.
Yeah, that's how
But
they
they're
do the recordings for the main cast on Teen Titans Go.
Yeah, but they're recording after the animation is at least more or less complete, and they're dubbing their own lines in. And then you get in the U.S., you get anime that's totally already created, and they're dubbing. A very good friend of mine, a name I will not say, is actually a American VA for anime. She's been in a number of lead roles in productions and has talked about the process to me. They sit with the lines in front of them. It's almost like doing haikus and dances around those lip flaps.
Yeah.
With CG, though, you can speed up or slow down the existing lip flaps, and it seems like that's what they're doing on the fly.
It was more the audio clips that they were doing that to, not the animation.
But what's interesting to me is the reason why they would do it, which wasn't covered in the article, and I'd like to go into major speculation time, if that's okay with you.
Sure, the Magic 8 Ball and that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, this is after the fact, so I don't think an 8-ball is needed. I think we need some 20/20 glasses over here. But, well, for me, for more reasons than one. Haha. The reason why I think they did it, if you all remember, the Ratchet movie had a lot of trouble getting up off the ground. And a big thing that they keep on announcing, even now, this close to the movie, is the celebrity voice cast over the actual primary actors, David Kane, James Arnold Taylor, etc.
Jim Ward and
Jim Ward
Zimmerman.
Yes. These four guys are doing probably a good lion's share of the lines, but who are they advertising? They're advertising the secondary cast, Sylvester Stallone, Bella Thorne, etc. I don't think those guys have all that many. Well, Bella Thorne will probably have quite a few, but Sylvester Stallone is playing what was originally a unnamed, very minor character in Ratchet and Clank 1.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure his part's been expanded considerably, but still, it's a 2-hour movie. How many individual lines is he going to have? And the fact that they're announcing the celebrity voice cast over the actual established voice, and I've also, again, this is very much unsubstantiated, heard rumors that they wanted to replace the entire voice cast, even Ratchet and Clank, with celebrity voices. Which made me...
And the guy who played Hulk as Clank.
Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo.
Mark Buffalo. Got it.
Now I've got Buffalo Soldier stuck in my head. Thanks. But if that were the case, and they'd originally put in placeholder voices and with the hopes not of Insomniac, but the filmmakers and Sony wanting an entire celebrity voice cast, what that means is they were basically holding out for the voices, and then maybe somebody in Insomniac was like, guys, we already have some good, awesome people. Can't we use the same voices?
Yeah, and considering that they are, and I hate to use this, but considering that they are voice actors, they're probably cheaper than most celebrity people that, celebrity live action video recording actors that they could get in.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Now, James Arnold Taylor's done quite a bit of work. I mean, he's playing multiple people in Guardians of the Galaxy, etc., so he's a lot more expensive than, say, David Kane. Yes, the cartoon. He's done some live-action stuff, too. Not that much, but he's done some.
But you were referring to the cartoon.
I was referring to the cartoon. But, of the four voice actors they pulled for Ratchet and Clank, and also, I think some of the minor characters for the game specifically are coming back. We know Big Al is there, but we don't know whose voice it is because we couldn't hear it at PSX.
I could. From what I can recall, it was the same guy. It sounded
Yeah.
very much like Al. I do not remember listening to Al's voice and going, "Oh, who's that?" I just remember listening to Al and going, "Oh yeah, that's Al," and I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, Dallas is the same voice actor, that I could tell. They're getting a lot of the minor guys back, which is awesome. But
Yeah, a
the
lot
fact,
of them are veterans at this.
and probably because someone at Sony or someone at Blockade, we don't know who or where, was pushing very hard for celebrity only cast. Somebody was stalling, and they animated it first, and then they got the voice actors later once they were able to get approval. That is my personal speculation as an outsider. I could be totally wrong.
Yeah.
But
it makes
that's
a certain amount of sense, because we know that Insomniac has been trying to get a Ratchet movie off the ground for a while now. And there's always been something where either the studio didn't believe in them or something caused Insomniac to walk away. And I personally believe, this is also my own speculation, I personally believe that the main reason for that was the fact that they wanted to use celebrities for the main cast. And Insomniac were like, no, we've already got these perfectly good guys, why would you do that?
Yeah, everybody knows those voices. If you suddenly changed it, it would be really weird. I like Giamatti for Drek, but that's a little bit different. He was in one game, and he wasn't a particular... I mean, he was the main villain, but he wasn't a particularly large portion of the audio.
No, this particular version of Drek is a little bit different, because the smooth businessman that he was in the first one, I think, is appropriately given way to the more destroy them all character that he is now.
Yeah, especially now I purposely haven't read the movie novel, which we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah.
So that I can speculate without going to spoiler territory, because I don't know anything.
Yeah, I'm having to be a very good dancer to try and avoid these spoilers.
Yeah, because spoilers are bad, folks, okay? But, so I did that on purpose, so I'm going into this with as fresh eyes as possible. My first spoiler is when I play the game on release day. That's when I'm going to spoil myself.
Yeah.
But, from what I can see of the trailers and what I see of all the media that's come out, is that he's got a different motivation this time around.
Yeah, he does.
You're trying so hard, Kebabs. I know you know something and you don't want to say it.
It's so difficult.
It's only 6 more weeks. You can do this.
That's like a lifetime.
To an ant.
Or a goldfish.
Hey, no, goldfish can live to be 10 years old.
Still, they have to sit in that fish tank the whole time. That's a lot of waiting in the same place.
That is true. That's gotta be boring. Yeah, so that's my speculation, is that they were doing everything but voices to try to convince them these are the guys we need.
Yeah. That would have been really difficult as an animator to do, unless they had like temp recorded by crew in the studio voices to work with.
I've heard that happen a lot. I know in Pixar, they temp recorded like what's her name? The
mode.
Yes. How did you know that was exactly where I was going with this?
Because I know the story.
Yeah, so they Pixar temp records a lot of its audio before they find a cast, so the animators have something to work on while they're still hammering that out. And one of the either the exec, I can't remember who it was, who actually recorded Edna Mode. They just loved. That would have
been Brad Bird, the writer.
Oh, it was Brad Bird himself. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I did not realize that was him. Yeah, they just loved Brad Bird's performance so much they didn't hire anybody else. They just kept it.
They did, actually. They hired someone, and Brad Pitt was all like, no, she's more like this. And then the voice actress said, well, why have you got me here? You've already nailed it.
I did not hear that part of the story. But that's pretty awesome. Yeah. Lion King also, I know, was very well known for using temp voices first before they were able to get...
Yeah, they usually do that for storyboards.
Yeah.
When they move into the actual production, they usually try and have the proper voice cast recorded by them.
But either way, in varying levels of production, they do already have recordings of the acting, just not the finished cast. So, I see them as stalling. I also, and again, I don't know how substantiated this is, but I've heard from multiple different sources that when the Ratchet and Clank movie was originally sort of talked about, that it was going to be live action, which would have been terrible, even if that was never something that came to pass. Can you imagine that? Just the amount of budget that they need. That's like
making a live-action Mario Brothers movie. Oh, wait!
I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy was able to get away with it because they only had 2 major aliens that were CG, and that was Rocket and Groot, and like 1 or 2 background characters. Everybody else was makeup. They kept it pretty grounded. Most of the characters were Xandarian, who looked human anyway. They didn't really involve too many of the really weird-looking ones. And in Ratchet and Clank, other than Quark, nobody looks vaguely... I mean, they're very vaguely humanoid, but they're not human proportioned.
Correct. Not to mention the fact that the Ratchet universe is specifically toned to be a cartoon. Or at least a CG cartoon. So having it in live action puts this extra level of realism and detail that it doesn't need. And I've had this myself, sort of looking at movies that are live action but should have been CG. So for example, take Rocky and Bullwinkle or Yogi Bear as examples, where, yeah, it sort of works in live action, but as soon as you put it in live action, your mind sort of starts thinking about all of the behind the scenes logistics of everything, and that doesn't happen when you're watching a cartoon.
Yeah, when you're watching a cartoon, you're walking into it already with that sense of disbelief in place. You walk into a cartoon already like you have this expectation, so the uncanny valley doesn't hit nearly as badly.
Yeah, well, not just that. What I'm talking about is, let me give an example. Transformers originally started out as a toy imported from Japan from various other toy lines and became a very popular cartoon in America that was in fact animated in Japan. Everybody knows that. When they put it in live action, when I watch the movie, one of the first things that I think about is, why isn't Optimus Prime causing massive craters in the pathway that he's walking down?
Yeah, because he's so heavy. He should be making potholes just from walking.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Like the end of Dark of the Moon takes place on a bridge in Detroit. Why doesn't Optimus Prime and Megatron just crush through the bridge and fall into the river? It's that sort
movie.
It wouldn't happen in a cartoon because you're not thinking about that, because you're not seeing the real items.
Yeah, and then when suddenly you're seeing this like 50 gajillion ton thing, and I'm going to reveal something here. I'm actually a city planner on my day job. The city planner in me is just going, no, that's exceeding its weight limit.
So yeah, I think that's all of the topics. The last one was about Dark Souls 3 and Uncharted 4, but A, we've already talked about it, and B, Uncharted 4 isn't going to be a problem anymore.
Yeah, so we're gonna, we don't really need to worry about that at all. Are we gonna move on to the next thing?
Yes, the next one is Bouncer pre-order content, because Vidi over on the Insomniac forums clarified the exact implementation of the Bouncer pre-order DLC. After unlocking it via code, the Bouncer will be waiting at the very first Gadgetron vendor you come across. I suspect this is going to be the vendor right outside Grimroth's garage at the start of the game on Velden, because I saw sort of a slice of it in the side of a screenshot, sort of that one of Ratchet standing outside of the garage looking up at the sky like a hero, all ambitious in that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Although according to Beast, Velden is the second planet in the game.
Huh. So the first planet is probably the one where you're playing as Clank.
Yeah, escaping from the factory in like in a crack in time, except this time on Quartu, and this time being chased by Victor rather than Nefarious.
Yep.
Because we've seen a screenshot for that. Fellow Insomniac Robbie Cox, don't laugh, clarified a few hours later that there is a 100 bolt purchase fee for taxes and fees, which I imagine is because they're importing it from the Bogon Galaxy, probably.
Man, taxes and fees are 100 bolts. That inflation's really hit Solana.
Unless it's like Pokemon, where it's in fact 10.
Yeah, well, 100. It's supposed to be yen for 100 Poké Dollars is basically equivalent to $1 US.
Yeah, I remember when I was playing Fire Red recently, and I defeat Youngster Joe. It's like, Youngster Joe give you 175 Poké Dollars. I'm like, damn, get you loaded.
No, he has $1 in his pocket. You just took $1 from a little kid.
And
Good job.
And that's probably all he had.
I thought they always gave you half of what they had. Because you lose half when you lose to a trainer.
That's true. I always assumed I was just robbing them of all their money, and now they're stuck in the woods with no cash to get a taxi home.
Also, when have you... Oh, no, in X and Y they've got taxis. I was going to say, when have you seen a taxi in Pokemon?
I was making a joke, of course.
I know, I'm making a joke right back.
Okay. We're terrible at this.
Yes, we are.
But what I also...
hopefully we get one person to laugh. If we get one person to laugh, I'm good. Okay, that was me.
Yeah, I said that I would do a Clank laugh somewhere. I'm glad I remembered. But what I realized was that there might actually be a gameplay reason as to why you have to spend the 100 bolts to buy it, which is because that early on in the game, that's probably going to be somebody's first purchase. As such, they need to be taught that you need to spend bolts on weapons. You can't just get them for free. So putting on 100 bolts means that they have to smash a bunch of crates in order to afford it.
Yeah, you don't just get it for free, because in the other games that have had weapon bonuses from earlier titles, that would be a Crack in Time, Going Commando and Up Your Arsenal. Crack in Time was a discount. Going Commando and Up Your Arsenal. Going Commando, you got them much later in the game. It was not the first place you could... It was not at the first vendor. It was... Going Commando, it wasn't until...
Oozla. The second world.
No, it was later than that. It wasn't until...
It was Oozla. Remember? You arrive, and then you're like, oh, look at all these cool weapons. Oh, I can only afford the chopper.
No. The previous game bonuses.
Oh, right.
In
That's not what
Going
I'm talking
Commando.
about here.
Yeah. No, I'm saying in Going Commando, your previous game bonuses were free, but they were much further in the story.
Yeah, you didn't get that until Barlow.
Yeah, you didn't get that till Barlow, and then the second game, you did get it right away, but it was only a 10% discount. It wasn't free weapons.
Yeah. You mean third, Up Your Arsenal, and then
Third, Up Your Arsenal.
Plateaus, blah, 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 blah. But what I'm referring to is that you don't just get a weapon at the vendor and you're handed it to free for a pre-order bonus. With a Crack in Time, they were already in your arsenal, and in All for One, they were early unlocks, but you had already, by that point, smashed enough crates to understand the bolt mechanic.
Yeah, so it's a good way of teaching new players. It's not totally free, but 100 bolts doesn't sound like a lot in this game.
No. But 100 bolts is still enough that, assuming Clank doesn't pick up any bolts during his Quartu escape, 100 bolts is enough that, okay, you can get that from the surrounding crates, near the vendor.
Yeah, there's always crates near vendors. I can't think of an area where there weren't.
Yeah, at least
it's usually a thing. Yeah, early in early levels, they always had a few, so you could get blaster ammo if you ran out.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to item number 5. Sunset Overdrive items in Rocket League. For the Xbox One release of smash hit sports game Rocket League, there will be several items included in the game. While there are Halo and Gears of War related vehicles, Sunset Overdrive will also be represented in the form of unlockable items. Said items are a fizzy head antenna bobble and overcharged Delirium XT energy drink boost. Marcus Smith mentioned on Insomniac's blog that the firing mechanism for the Captain Ahab can be heard when firing the boost, which is appropriate since that weapon spewed overcharge over the ground when you fired it.
I really don't have that much to add, having never played either Sunset Overdrive or Rocket League, but that just sounds pretty awesome that they're doing this partnership. Go Insomniac.
Visually Sunset Overdrive fits very well with Rocket League. Have you seen the screenshot of the overcharge boost?
Yeah, it looks
it looks
cool.
It looks like it just fits in perfectly.
And considering that Sunset Overdrive and Rocket League are both just over the top.
Yeah.
It just seems like a very good fit.
It does.
But I got nothing else to say on that because I'm not familiar with both games other than just looking visually at them.
Yeah, and there's pretty much nothing really to add. It's just an Insomniac-related thing. Here you go. Now, item number 6 is TJ Fixman has been brought in to write the animated adaptation of Popeye, the famous spinach-eating sailor created by LZ Segal way back when Helga was a wee lass in 1919.
Yeah, that's I forgot Popeye's been around for that long.
Yeah. The last film adaptation was a 1980 film with the late Robin Williams playing the title role.
It's a very underrated film. It's very weird and surreal. But this new Popeye is going to be CG, right? That's
yeah, I believe it is.
So that good on TJ. I'm glad to see that he's continuing to get a steady stream of interesting writing work for him.
Yeah, the last we heard of him, he was with Hasbro. We later found out that he was writing for Transformers. Specifically, he was part of sort of like this writer room get-together where a bunch of writers were brought in to sort of figure out the future direction of the Transformers movie universe.
Yeah, and which I thought was pretty cool. Like, we knew he'd been coming on to Hasbro, but originally for what wasn't released. So it's interesting to see him picking up Transformers. And you called that months ago when we were talking about what we thought he was going to be doing there.
Yeah, he seemed to fit Transformers the most. Especially given that Transformers is Hasbro's most relevant brand these days.
And My Little Pony, but I didn't think he would be a good fit for that.
Yes, okay, but My Little Pony hasn't appeared at any visual effects nominations for Oscars recently, has it?
No.
Alright, well, this is a section that I've newly christened Hollow Mail! Hollow Mail!
It almost sounds like Hotmail. But we've got 3 questions.
4.
4. Oh, there's a 4th. Okay.
Yeah, it was one from episode 11 that we didn't get to.
Okay, so we have 3 questions from Julian C 1991, and then the 4th question is from.
I can't remember. I didn't write it down.
Oh no.
But
well,
let me just run question 4 by you in case we did answer it. It was about the metal detector.
We didn't. No, we did not cover the metal detector question.
Okay, well then let's start from the top.
All right. From the top of Hollow Mail?
Yeah.
All right.
No, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Lunar Observer episode 12. Okay, first question. Julian C. 1991 asks, apart from his wrench, what do you think is Ratchet's most iconic tool in his arsenal? Weapon, gadget, device, inventory, etc. Perhaps pick one and include some honorable mentions.
I was going to make a joke mention of the spider bot because you know how I feel about that, but
we're talking about iconic, not your most favoritist of all times.
It's the swing shot. I mean, you if it's not going to be the wrench, it's got to be the swing shot.
Yeah, there's definitely a heavy case for the swing shot, especially in the PS2 era. But I would disagree for nowadays, considering that the swing shot it's now been a weapon that only equips automatically, so you never really get a good look at it anymore.
That is true. No, it didn't. In a Crack in Time, you had to equip it from the select wheel, from the D-pad wheel.
Yeah, the gadget quick select. That was cool.
Yeah, it stopped equipping after a Crack in Time, so it's only the 3 most recent games, and that would be the 2 the two non-platformers in All for One, Full Frontal Assault, and then into the Nexus.
I can't remember manually equipping it in Tools of Destruction, but that may just be me in my memory.
You can manually equip it in Tools of Destruction.
Ooh, that's cool. Like how you can manually equip the Hollow Wings, and it will still work like the Thruster Pack. And, and the Hydro Pack, actually.
Yeah. In Tools of Destruction, you can manually equip it, but I believe it auto-equips when you go over a gap.
Yeah. There's also the fact that Ratchet's Slingshot features prominently in the movie as well.
Yeah, it's in several of the movie posters, and it's an interesting. It's a device that they keep showing in the trailers and in key art for a couple of reasons. That's really cool. One, swinging mechanics mean two very dynamic scenes in movies.
Yeah.
More so than even just shooting guns, because shooting a gun is you're holding up the gun and suddenly there's a bang. That's why some of Ratchet's more interesting weapons, like the tornado launcher or the blades of doom, are also the dynamo of doom are also featured in not dynamo the blades that spin and come back, the reader choice winner.
Spiral of Death.
Spiral of Death. There we go. I could not brain here. So that's why those weapons are also featured in the trailer, because they're just really visually interesting. The swing shot is one of those things. You see this glowing tether, and then Ratchet swinging around like Spider-Man all over the screen. It looks cool.
Yeah, that's one of the things as well. When Ratchet is using the swing shot, there is a certain acrobaticness, sort of agility, sort of feline sensibilities that you immediately think of. This isn't a guy who will resort to guns all the time. This is a guy who can jump around the battlefield.
Yeah, so it's a visually stunning device. The glowing tether that they included starting, was it going commando when they switched to a glowing tether, or was
it would have been up your arsenal when it became a hyper shot. It lost the dynamo functionality and deadlocked, but it kept everything else. So that's why. So they call it the swing shot again.
And from then on, it's always had a glowing sort of electro tether, and it just looks cool. If the swing shot doesn't count, it's probably going to be the hover boots, but that's more recent.
Yeah. Everyone's going to kill me for this, but I think that despite all the fans not wanting this to happen, it's the combustor.
Well, they've sort of made it that way. They wanted a generic pistol to be...
Yeah, it's been featured on the covers for Tools of Destruction European, All for One, and Into the Nexus. No, that was the Omni Blaster. But also, it is very prominently featured in the movie because the combustor is the standard issue pistol for the Galactic Rangers, and Ratchet starts the game with one.
Interestingly enough, we never see him... Do we ever see him fire one in any of the trailers? We see him with other weapons, but never the actual combustor, as far as I remember.
No, but still, all the other Rangers have been depicted using combustors.
Yeah. The combustors one, as far as other weapons, Mr. Zircon might count.
Yeah.
But the Groovatron also. The Groovatron is definitely one of Ratchet's more iconic tools.
Yeah.
Anything else on that list? So our short list is really the swing shot, the combustor, maybe the hover boots, and the Groovatron.
Yeah, I'd say that's a solid list of iconic weapons. Sort of like weapons that you would expect Ratchet to be holding if it wasn't the wrench, is my sort of category for this.
Yeah. So the second question, what do you think are Ratchet and Clank's best adventure yet? And be flexible when defining best. Also Spyro's adventure.
Well, what does he mean by adventure? Does that mean sort of like the overall adventure that Ratchet went on? Or is he meaning, what do you think is Ratchet and Clank's best game?
I think, well, he said be flexible, so I'm going to take it from the most unusual and interesting storyline. And
yeah, I'm going to
take comics for me.
Yeah, I would say adventure as well, because
Yeah.
that is more interesting than just saying the best game. And we all know what that is. That's a crack in time.
Yeah.
So best adventure.
The comics. People don't talk about it that much, but I thought it was a very interesting story for him. It was very weighted by Ratchet's loss of Alistair, and you saw that everywhere, from the wrench on the wall, from just his grief and his anger, his lack of desire to want to do anything other than a quote from the first issue was. Clank was I can't do it verbatim, but Clank was telling him he needs to get out there and help, and Ratchet replied, "Nobody ever died from fixing ships."
Okay, hold on, I got you covered. I'm getting out the comic.
Yeah, the comics are unfortunately in the other room, and I'm not gonna go pull them out of their plastic sheaths right now.
Okay, Clank goes, "Replacing a busted warp capacitor never saved someone's life," and Ratchet replies, "Maybe, but it never took one either," while looking at the picture of Azimuth in the pocket watch.
Yeah, I mean, that's heavy.
Mm.
It was the logical conclusion of the future trilogy, really. And we did eventually get into the Nexus that went even deeper and darker.
Yeah, and All for One sort of wrapped up Ratchet's resolutions about that with the whole Susie thing.
Yeah. But the comics aren't talked about nearly enough, and they're just such an interesting part of canon, because it's purely story. I hate to say it, but I'm not a big fan of the art of the comics, but the writing is superb, and it's TJ Fixman, because of course it is. The covers by Creature Box are great, but I've just never really been a fan of the line, either the inks or the coloring of the comic. But the writing is just, you couldn't get sentences like that in the game, because they just don't, what works in a comic doesn't work in a game. So he's really able to touch on a lot of topics that TJ was able to touch up on a lot of topics and clear them up that just wouldn't work in a Ratchet game because of how fast they are.
Yeah, with a video game, you really only have sort of 30-second to a minute spurts of being able to tell the story via cutscene, but then you have to quickly get back into the gameplay because people are there for the gameplay.
Yeah, and there's plenty of things you can tell via gameplay, and plenty of games have no audio at all. Everything of Journey is told through gameplay, for example, and Ratchet and Clank do actually tell quite a bit of story through their gameplay without any actual dialogue.
Yeah, that was what year did the first Uncharted come out? 2006 or 2007?
6 or 7. It was around the same time as Tools.
Okay, because I remember I was playing the demo, I think, of the first Uncharted game, and the main thing that blew me away was the non-cutscene storytelling. I wouldn't be surprised if most PS2 games, like, for example, Grand Theft Auto did this, but for me, Uncharted was the first major game that I found where characters do major story things, like discussing the mystery at hand, without using a cutscene. They were just talking about it as you were playing.
Yeah, and Tools of Destruction did that as well.
Yeah,
Ratchet and Clank would...
Ratchet looking over his shoulder to talk to Clank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, yours is the comics. I'm still struggling to think of mine. Adventure. I'm probably going to have to say Up Your Arsenal.
It's a good choice, too.
Because we've already explained the fact that Up Your Arsenal has a shorter story, and that's because it had to accommodate for the multiplayer. The downside of that is that the levels weren't as expansive as before. The upshot of that is that the story now had lots more momentum, and it was very moment-to-moment, gag-a-minute stuff, and that made the adventure just a ridiculously fun ride to be on. So that's my pick, Up Your Arsenal. Now, Spyro's.
I really can't talk to Spyro because I've only played one Insomniac Spyro title.
Yeah. And for me, the choice is pretty obvious, and that is the third game, Year of the Dragon. And the reason for that is because each Spyro game adds more storytelling in it. The first Spyro game pretty much had nothing. You had the intro and the ending, and you had a lot of in-betweens with Spyro talking to the various dragons about, I'm gonna defeat Nasty Nork, I'll toast him! But that's not really storytelling, it's just sort of Spyro sort of making a declaration to a dragon every so often. Spyro 2 added actual, more cinematics that told the storytelling. But it was basically the same thing 3 times. Basically, Ripto shows up in one of the Avalon worlds, takes over the castle, and you gotta defeat him. And that's pretty much it. With Spyro 3, you had Spyro encounters... do I need to explain the plot of Year of the Dragon to you?
Year of the Dragon is the one that I played.
Oh, okay. How far did you get into it? How much can you remember?
It's been so long. Okay. I really don't remember very much other than remembering I played it. The other one I have is Season of Fire, which wasn't Insomniac, so...
Yeah. And I'm going to limit myself to Insomniac's adventures because A, they're the best, and B, they're the ones I know the most. But with Year of the Dragon, basically, it is the Year of the Dragon where dragon eggs come along, and it's basically a festival for all the new baby dragons that have shown up, except they are stolen by these thieves, led by the sorceress. And one of these thieves is a rabbit called Bianca. And over the course of the story, she falls in love with the hunter character, and she realizes that what she's doing is wrong and switches sides.
Mm-hmm.
And this is told sort of, through proper cutscenes, and Bianca at first taunting Spyro, then really trying to warn him not to keep going because the sorceress will kick his butt, and then she switches over to helping him. And that is very interesting, and is the most storytelling of any of the Insomniac Spyro titles. So that is why, for me, the obvious pick is the third game.
Okay, and it's the only one I've seen, so... I really can't... I have no point of comparison, because the other one is Season of Fire, which wasn't... I mean, it was one of my first games, so I can't really talk about it other than that, but that's it. Those are my choices as far as Spyro. So, continuing...
Now the last question by Julian C. 1991. If Insomniac Games would make another Ratchet and Clank game that is not in the classic formula, such as Deadlocked, All for One, Full Frontal Assault, like a spin-off, which direction do you think would suit it best? Racing, arena, fighting, trading card game, etc.?
I actually thought about this for a bit, and I would love to see a sort of... I know this is going to sound really silly, but a sort of mobile or like low-budget tie-in Quark, another one of Quark's little mini-games.
So a side-scrolling vidcomic series.
Either a vidcomic series or like I loved, as bad as it was, My Blaster Runs Hot was also a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would like a My Blaster Runs Hot style Captain Quark vidcomic series, which is something that everyone has been asking for since Up Your Arsenal, and when the whole sort of small downloadable title thing came along, a lot of people suggested that this is what Insomniac could do.
Yeah, that they could make a more vid comics.
Yeah. Since you picked side-scroller, that is a very good answer, sort of a vidcomic side-scroller. My answer would be racing, if it were anything like the hoverbike racing.
Oh, expanding that out into...
Well, yeah, my sort of idea, because I have thought about this, is that a Ratchet racing game would not limit itself to just one vehicle. You would have various different event types. So you would have hoverboards, which are more SSX-like, where you have to do tricks in order to earn boost. You would have hover bikes, which are very fast, very pod race-like from Star Wars, with weapons and guns and that sort of thing. And then you would have interstellar dogfights, which are more about eliminating the competition in a local arena. So Ratchet Racing wouldn't just be racing, it would just be anything to do with vehicles.
That would be pretty awesome.
Yeah. And funnily enough, the fourth Ratchet game was actually originally going to be Ratchet Racing until Insomniac discovered that Naughty Dog was making Jack X, so they decided to go over to a different concept. That was going to be Ratchet and Clank Nexus, but they shelved that and decided to go with Deadlocked instead. And as a note, Ratchet and Clank Nexus is not the same as Into the Nexus, so it was going to be a very different game.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you said there was one final question?
Yeah, basically, discuss the metal detector. Was it good? Could it be included again? How could it be improved?
Oh god, the metal detector. Okay.
It sucked.
It sucked. It didn't give you enough bolts for what you needed. You could only use it when the area was cleared of enemies, because you'd have to switch out to a weapon in order to defend yourself.
Yeah. So no, it was not good.
No, I mean, the idea was interesting, and especially in Ratchet and Clank 1, where you were really hurting for bolts.
Yeah. Like, who could
one
afford
and
the
then
Tesla Colt when they first visited Altanus? Nobody.
No one. The only game that had that much problems as far as being able to afford stuff was Up Your Arsenal if you didn't have the discount and didn't play Going Commando for the free weapons.
Oh, it had a problem even then, in my opinion, because there was no way you could afford everything. And if you bought everything, all of a sudden, you couldn't afford the ever-crucial Annihilator rocket launcher on Tyrannosis, and you were stuffed.
Yeah, then you had to go and grind. But
Yeah.
Going Commando didn't have that problem, and Tools On didn't really have that problem.
No. I mean, yeah, you can run into situations where you cannot afford a weapon at first, but you don't get sort of like the piles upon piles of unbought weapons like Up Your Arsenal did.
And speaking of which, the new game, we've already seen, 15 weapons plus the bouncer?
Yeah, Animator 16 did a tot-up of all the weapons that we've seen so far that Ratchet can use, and it landed at about 15, which is the average for Ratchet and Clank weapons, so we've probably seen everything. You're more than welcome to prove us wrong, Insomniac, but for now, I'm just going to assume, oh, okay, we know everything, no surprises.
Yeah, I have a feeling that there's still weapons we haven't seen yet, in which case this would be as many weapons as Up Your Arsenal.
Yeah, it had a lot. Going Commando had the most amount of weapons. If you count the Ratchet and Clank 1 weapons, I think it came out to 20, 25.
Oh wait, yeah, Going Commando did have more than Up Your Arsenal, because Up Your Arsenal only took a few from the other two games.
Yeah. So, how would the metal detector be improved if you were to implement that concept again?
Offhand item, that it would be automatic, sort of like Ratchet, like you can turn on and off the beeping in the background that you want, and if you have it on, the minute that you get close to a beeping area, you automatically pick up those bolts.
Yeah.
While you still have a weapon in hand. That's the big thing, is if you didn't have to activate it, even if it only gave you a few, it's just like, it's a nice little bonus for doing some sort of side quest.
Yeah. That was my suggestion as well. Having it be something that you had to equip, even though the bolt icon would appear without you needing to equip it, the fact that you had to equip it, you had to either take up a slot on your quick select, or you had to dig it out of the gadgets menu. And then you had to go look for it.
Yeah, and then while you were equipping it, you had no weapon in hand in case somebody popped up.
Yeah, like those surprise ankle biters on Hoven.
Yeah. So, making it a quote-unquote offhand item, like what the swing shots become, where it's just automatically activated when you're near an area that can use it, would go a long way to making it a much more useful tool.
Yeah, I've never really been much of a fan of the find an item somewhere mechanic, like with the metal detector or the raritanium mining ships. Because I like to know exactly where something is when I go over there to break it.
Well, I've got nothing else to say on the metal detector. Got
The
any
only
final
thing that's
thoughts?
really niggling at my head, sort of like the last problem, is the whole sucking it out of the ground mechanic. Because you can have it on hand, but I think it's a little bit too boring to have it suck up out of the ground automatically when you walk over it. So how would that be improved? Maybe... Oh, I know. You find it, it's marked as a holographic X on the ground, and you have to do a hyper strike on the X to break it open.
So like in the 2 multiplayer games, in All for One and
Full Frontal Assault.
Full Frontal Assault, you had those boxes that you had a hyper strike to open.
Yeah.
So once you've earned the metal detector, it's permanently in your inventory. You can't ever actually access it, but what it does is it creates the beeping, and you can turn that on and off.
Yeah, but how would you turn it on and off then?
You could go into the gadgets menu like you would for gadgets that you have on hand but don't actually activate. So like the trespasser and whatnot, you know how they always have a slot in your inventory?
Yeah.
So you go in there and you say, I don't want the beeping, or I want the beeping.
That to me doesn't absolve the you have to equip it thing, because you have to equip it to turn on the beeping, then we're back at square one.
But then you don't have to worry about having a weapon in hand, and you can just leave it on if you'd like to. It just prevents people who don't like the annoying beeps, that they can turn it off.
I guess. Well, what if it was like an arrow or something, or like a sonar thing that pops up at Ratchet's feet?
That also works, and then you don't have to worry about beeping or people who are deaf playing the game.
Yeah.
So you've earned it. You now have this arrow or sonar thing at your feet, and then you hyper strike. So it's never an item that you ever actually have to access. You've just earned the ability to get more bolts in certain areas that you couldn't before.
Yeah, I think the other thing that would really help is don't have the bolt points come back if you leave a planet.
That they're one-time use?
Yeah, exactly, which means that the payout can be larger. So you're more rewarded for finding them. It's like looking around a secret corner and finding, oh look, there's a giant crate and a bunch of normal crates. That's a bolt bonus, hooray! And also, when you pick up the mapper or the map-o-matic, then mining areas are marked on the map.
Yes,
so
that's such a good idea.
Where they are. You just have to head over to them.
So it's sort of like a gold bolt, like in addition to gold bolt locations being marked.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no mystery of, I've covered this area 3 times. I don't know if I found anything. I only get 200 bolts for this. It's not worth it. Hooray! We've solved the mystery.
So that's how I think collectively we have solved the how do we make the metal detector less useless and less annoying.
Yeah, and something you might actually want to use.
Cool. So for time's sake, because we've now gone on for an hour and a half, we're actually going to be splitting the news up into 2 separate episodes. So if you want to hear the rest of the news from the end of January all the way up till last week, we will be covering the rest of the news in episode 13. So let's call
funnily
this
enough,
one...
we've already covered the news for today because we covered the Uncharted 4 thing.
Yeah, that was pure and utter luck. I'm glad I had Safari open at the same time. All right, so we're gonna.
You know what the top-rated comment is?
What?
Probably need to recheck all the art in the background.
Oh, burn!
Apply burn heal.
apply cold water to the burn. So on that note, we're going to call Lunar Observer episode 12 officially over. And we'll see you in episode 13.
Okay. Yep, we shall. See you then.